Right, so for this exercise, we're going to practice in a very simple use case using what we've learned about exceptions and assertions. And, assertions in particular, we've been, for in quite a number of programming exercises, we've written our own test code. And we've written code to print out error messages when things don't appear the way we think they're supposed to be. The assertions are actually a maybe even a more powerful approach towards this idea. We can assert something that we expect, and not only will the program print a message out, but it'll actually stop and halt the program. So it's even harder to ignore. It's also nice because you know by default it will not print out anything if the assertion holds, and so it's not a total disaster with it if you keep this stuff in your code, if you keep the assertions in your code as scaffolding, and then you build out the rest of your program. From an efficiency sake, it's not a great idea to have tons and tons of assertions in there, and it's not a bad idea. Now we're also going to look at raising our own exceptions when we find conditions that we don't really know what to do with. So for this, it's a pretty simple application. We're going to write a function that accepts a list of integers, and we're going to return the first even number in the list. Obviously, so we've got to return something, right? If we have the somewhat exceptional case where there are only odd numbers, there are no even numbers, that's when we're going to throw an exception. I'm going to throw a value error and kind of crash the program, I guess. And so we'll set up some test cases to ensure that we know whether our program works or not. Okay, so before I even write the body of this function, so I'll do find evens, and here's my numbers. I'm going to just pass on it. I'm not going to do much here. I'm going to write my test cases. So I'm going to say find evens, and I'm going to pass in a list containing a bunch of numbers. And certainly the first even number um, should be 2, right? So we're going to assert, we're going to use the assert clause, that t is equal to 2. And if it's not, we'll print out what we got. So expected to got t. Okay. So that's our first test case. Let's do another one. And let's do something like 8, 4, 2. All right, just kind of testing whether or not we get the first value. Again, we'll assert that t equals 8, expected 8, got whatever t is. And so I've tested a couple of different conditions here. Um, you know, there's probably a law of diminishing returns here. I don't know how much else. If these are working, I don't know why any other conditions wouldn't work. But I probably want to test the situation where I'm supposed to throw an assertion, throw an exception. So if I do find evens and I only have odd numbers, what happens? Well, in reality, that's supposed to throw an exception. So I'm going to do a try clause. And the try block, if something throws an exception within it, we'll have an accept, where we accept a value error. And I'm going to say print it works. So it's kind of a weird use case because most times we don't want exceptions, but when we're writing test code, we want to make sure that find evens does throw an exception in this circumstance. It's sort of like this is the positive case. It's a little strange, but for test conditions, it sometimes happens. More importantly, if we make it to the next statement, remember if find evens throws an exception, if it raises an exception like it's supposed to, we should never get here. So I'm going to make an assertion, but I'm not going to, it's kind of a strange assertion in that I'm going to assert false. That can never be true. False can never be true. So it's always going to raise this assertion error. Okay. So I'm guaranteed to throw an assertion if I get here. Hopefully I won't get here, and hopefully I'll get down here. And in fact, I don't even have to print out it works. I can just say pass. right? Remember, pass is there as a syntactical helper for us. We need to put something in the except clause if we don't want to do anything, and really we don't want to do anything here, right? It's a positive test case, and I'm not going to try to get away from reporting the test cases worked, right? I only want to report when they don't work. All right, so I'm going to return 0 and just kind of prove out that, of course, my test cases fail. Okay, so Python 3. Okay, and yeah, so I immediately got in an error. The assert t equals 2. This was my assert clause was getting thrown. I do need to fix this a little bit because actually I'm getting an error because I'm not converting to string. You see my assert started, right? My assert was executing, but there's an actual error in my assertion. Okay, but now I got something a little bit more clear. All right, so expected got 2, expected 2 got 0, right? And we know, of course, that's the case. All right, so for n in numbers, if n mod 2 is equal to 0, that means it's even. I'll return it. And if not, I'll raise an exception. Value error. If I get all the way through this list and I never find an even number, the list does not contain an odd or an even. If I run my program, nothing prints out, and essentially that's good news, right? That means all of my assertions were true. T was 2, T was 8, and it also means that I did not reach line 21. By the way, if I had thrown something else, some other kind of error, and there's a lot of types of errors, we might do something like there's a an EOF error. It's an end of file error. Clearly that has nothing to do with what's going on here. But if I run this code now and I threw the wrong type of error, we can see it, right? We raised an error, but that wasn't caught, right? And so we're throwing an error that we're not supposed to see, right? So there was some value in actually catching that value error, right? Okay, so at this point, that this is a nice little example of using some of these exceptions. We're going to start using them a little bit more frequently. You'll start to use code that will raise exceptions. In fact, we've already used code that will raise exceptions. That now we have the power to start to handle them a little bit better, and we also have the power of using assertions in our test cases, which offers a little bit more power over our tests.